Would you please pray with me? Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. According to the Olympics last night, Pittsburgh is the greatest hockey city in the country. Did anyone see that last night during the Olympic coverage on NBC? They talked about the U.S.-Russia hockey game at 7 a.m. yesterday morning, and it was like a cutaway. And here's one of the bars in Pittsburgh showing the game, and they showed a big raucous crowd in Pittsburgh. Pretty awesome, right? For us Pittsburghers, that's the only place they showed watching the game. So since we're such an amazing hockey town, all you out there, you know all about assists, right? And we've always been great appreciators of the assist in Pittsburgh. We had Lemieux, Crosby, guys that were really all about the assist. And so I want to start off this morning by giving an assist to someone else for this sermon. Usually these sermons are sort of the mutual work of myself and often our Bible studies on Wednesday here at House of Prayer. This week, as I mentioned, we met with the preaching class also, and they wanted me to give them credit for this sermon. They're a humble bunch, you could tell, wanting me to give them credit in church on Sunday morning. So I'll do that, but that's not the assist I want to give out. I want to give a notable assist to Pastor Carl from my wife's family's home Methodist church back in Marion Center, Pennsylvania. Because last week we were there at that church, Stacy's family's home church, for a family birthday on Saturday and for a baptism on Sunday. And Pastor Carl talked about listing. Like, not like Santa Claus list or like making a list of things you need to buy at the grocery store. Not that kind of listing. Like the listing of a boat rocking back and forth. Do you know of that listing? It was a beautiful image and one that totally enamored me. He used it kind of in the children's sermon, and then when he got to the sermon, the adult sermon, he kind of moved in a different direction. So this week, Pastor Carl is getting the assist for giving me the idea from that children's sermon on listing. And I, like any good goal scorer, because obviously I am, I'll take that assist and we'll put it in the back of the net, right? You know listing? Have you heard that phrase before? Have you watched sailboats before when they're out and gathering the wind into their sails? The boat rocks back and forth, right, in the wind. That's how it gets propelled down through the water. These great big sails. But do you know what's on the underside of the boat? There's a keel, or what's the other word? A centerboard on the underside of the boat, because if it wasn't for that big flap underneath the boat, the wind would just like knock the thing over, right? So there's this other piece underneath that keeps the boat from tipping over. And instead, rather than tipping over, the boat lists back and forth with the wind. It moves with the wind. Listing. When I was in junior high, I had a band director named Mr. Cribbs. Mr. Cribbs had been around the block a few times by the time I had him for band. In fact, he had actually been my dad's band director. Mr. Cribbs knew his stuff and had been around for a while. He knew how to do his shtick. Like when he talked and he taught, he intentionally, in a very focused way, spoke. And it was very soft. Come on, flutes. You need to do better than that. That's not good enough. Again, at measure 23. You had to pay attention. Or, Mr. Sourwine, do you have a problem? Is there something that you need to talk about and you want to share with everybody? You never said that to me. That's a hypothetical. To be honest, I was actually pretty well behaved in Mr. Cribbs' band class. I was on guard. You couldn't be messing around too much with him in charge because he was so sharp and so quiet. He didn't talk loud enough to cover your talking up. Instead, I found myself always like on the edge, straining to hear him. Do you know people like that, where you're always shifting your phone around your ear, trying to find the right spot, that the microphone's just right there? He was a guy that I found myself sitting on the edge of my chair, leaning in to hear him. Listing. I found myself listing in his direction. Of course, nowadays I don't find myself listing to Mr. Cribbs, but I do find myself listing in other directions. I find myself listing to my computer, to my iPad, to my iPhone. A couple weeks ago, I used our label maker at home to put a label on the outside bevel of my computer, like at the very top. You know how there's like that black space around your screen? I put a label around that, and the label said, "How important is the thing you are doing?" ? Because I find it very easy to be sitting at my computer while looking at Amazon or my Kindle app or message boards or religious blogs or news sites or whatever. And all the while, my kids coming up to me, standing beside me, wanting to say something about what's happening in their life, while they're trying to tell me what the life of a 3-year-old is like, or what new thing my 5-year-old has just discovered in the world. Meanwhile, I'm listening to the ramblings of Pirate Fan 71 on the message board as he vents about the Pirates not signing A.J. Burnett. I've had lots of moments like that one. No doubt you have as well. Like, I remember a night, maybe a year and a half ago, we all went out to dinner, our family, the 5 of us, with Stacy's parents, her mom and dad. We went down to Max and Irma's in Robinson there to have dinner. And while we were sitting around the table talking and kind of waiting for our food to arrive, Bob, Stacy's dad, kind of motioned for me to look at the table behind me. So I very casually looked back. Table, family, mother, father, boy, maybe about 10, daughter about 7 or so, all sitting there like this. Each one of them completely engrossed in their Nintendo DS or their cell phone or whatever the mobile device was. No talking with each other. And at first we chuckled. It was funny, right? Oh, look at them all. That's so weird. I mean, you read about that kind of stuff. It was funny to actually see it. And we all did chuckle. But they were so unaware that I was watching them or that we were watching them, I probably could have gone like, and they wouldn't have noticed. And then I thought about it, and I didn't laugh anymore. They were listening, right? Leaning into something not good in that moment. And hear me out, I don't mean to speak badly of computers or iPhones or mobile devices or whatever the things are. Don't get me wrong, I think they are great and awesome things from time to time. They offer great rewards in matter of connection, information, accessibility, education, ease of use. They can be a great gift to our lives, as can many things. They can also consume our lives. Jesus talks about this idea of being consumed, does he not? He talks about the idea of having masters. And he says you can't serve 2 masters. Like he says that you'll be totally engrossed in one and leave the other one kind of in the dust. Or the one that you're leaving in the dust, you can be consumed with that one and not the other. The point is, you can't be consumed with both. With 2 things. You can only do one well. And we know this is true, right? We know it's true. We talk about being good multitaskers, right? Who would say that they're a pretty good multitasker? Yeah, okay, the rest of you are just not very honest with yourselves. I like to boast. I'm a good multitasker. I can do lots of things at one time. Like I can look at my iPad and talk to my kids at the same time, right? I like to sit on the couch at night with the TV on and my iPad on my lap, thinking that I'm doing all those things well, soaking in whatever I'm watching on TV, watching my kids so they aren't ingesting small toys, and gathering whatever information's on my iPad. Some of us like to sit with the TV on while we're eating dinner, maybe the radio on, and we're saying we're consuming all the most of all those situations. But the reality is, we don't do it well, do we? Now, maybe you believe that about yourself, like, well, yeah, there's other jokers, they can't do it right, but I'm good at it. I can multitask. Think of a moment when you have ever seen anyone else multitasking well. Like, tell me about that time you were riding with someone and they were driving and texting at the same time and it was going super well. Or tell me about the time you were at the mall in that kids play area and the dad was trying to make phone calls or mess around on his phone, and his son comes over and wants to tell him about the new friend he's made. Did it look like it was going really well? Did it look like he was multitasking well? I mean, whoever thinks those moments are beautiful? You know the Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax? They made a movie about it. The little Lorax character, he's like the little orange guy. He's the defender of the trees. And at this one point in the story, the Lorax says, "Which way does a tree fall?" And the wasteful character, the Wunsler, he answers, down. The Lorax responds, "The tree falls the way it leans. Be careful which way you lean." The tree falls the way it leans. Be careful which way you lean. There's some truth. Amen? Be careful which way you lean. Be careful which way you list. Sometimes in this community, we can get pretty overwhelmed with the heaviness of Jesus, right? All that Jesus calls us to do, the care that Jesus calls us to have, the people like those who are going to try to help out with these bags that Jesus calls us to care for. It seems like Jesus asks a whole lot of us all the time. And it's easy to look at the story of Jesus and get stuck on darkness and sadness. I mean, he and his parents, we found out already in Matthew, they have to run away to Egypt soon after he's born because evil King Herod wants to kill him. He's tempted by the devil as soon as he becomes an adult. He takes over the mission of a decapitated John the Baptist. He's seemingly always confronted with angry and evil religious leaders. We know he will be tortured and crucified and killed. But that's not all that Jesus is about. That's certainly not what following Jesus is about. That's not what it looks like when we learn to list into God's kingdom. Because God's kingdom is about loving people. It's about miraculous amounts of food being made available to thousands, miraculously small, that becomes miraculously large. It's about parties, right? It's about stories where heroes generously show up and heap overwhelming benevolence on unsuspecting people. It's about fathers who throw huge parties for sons that are terrible human beings. It's about abundant harvests. It's about little things like small bushes and seeds and yeasts that grow to be huge, abundant crops. It's about lowly birds that gracefully and healthily fill the skies. It's about lilies and all sorts of plants that grow in abundance and naturally in God's kingdom. God's kingdom of justice and reconciliation that happen in the very midst of us all the time. You see, God's kingdom is full of wondrous and mysterious things. It's full of beauty and extravagance that's meant for us. It's full of music and dancing and singing, warmth in the midst of coldness and snow, dryness in the midst of rain deluges. It's a kingdom that's always reconciling and re-energizing. God is happiness and wholeness. My cell phone, not so much. God is love. My iPad and my computer, not so much. God is righteousness and justice. The news, the other things in our lives, not so much. Friends, which way are you listing? Amen.